Hello, 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 my dear friends. I'm Holly Elissa, and I say, wish you all wonderful things on this Christmas Day, 2023. You are joining trauma survivors, walking each other home, hoping to find meaning, joy, peace, and understanding, and a calmness of heart throughout this journey of living a life when our childhoods included punishment, included abuse, included rejection, included abandonment, included pain, included loneliness. When our ACEs, our adverse childhood experiences scores are high, and when our self-esteem is low, when our desire and our yearning for love is just wrenching to our hearts, and yet our experience with receiving love is like drinking life through a straw, was barely there. The life of a trauma surviving child is both most difficult, and I also want to say it can bring the greatest meaning. So let's together today reflect on what it means to be a trauma survivor. On this day in history, if you are of the Christian faith, this is a really crucial day, the birth of the baby Jesus. If you are a pagan, you know that the light has changed. Finally, the light is returning. If you're Jewish, Hanukkah may have passed by, but the light has returned and the people have been saved. And if you celebrate Kwanzaa, that's coming up so soon. And let us rejoice in the values, the beautiful community values that Kwanzaa reminds us to share. So let me begin doing something here that I haven't done in a while. This program began a little over, well, my gosh, going on 4 years ago. And it began when my book, which is called Happiness is Running Through the Streets to Find You, Translating Trauma's Harsh Legacy and Healing. When this book came out, I began to do a podcast. And the podcast was exploring with you, how can we live a good life, a healing life, even a happy life, a joyous life, a real life, a not dissociated life as trauma survivors, without denying that it hurt, without denying the pain that we experienced, and at the same time claiming our birthright to joy. So I'd like to start this Christmas day reading a passage to you. And it's like the rest of the book. It's bittersweet. And this is called, I'm on page 116. And if you've got this book, you're all set. If you don't, you can get it from Exchange Press, probably Amazon too, but I hear people are having some trouble with that. So go to Exchange Press in Lincoln, Nebraska. It's a small press, university-related press. So go there and you can find the book. And if you use the word happiness, you'll get a discount. The purpose of this conversation is not to sell the book. The purpose is to connect and to invite and to welcome all trauma survivors to come together in a way that feels safe and to share with each other how we're learning, how we're growing, how we're feeling on this day of days. And so let's start right there before we go to the book. How do you feel, my friends? How do you feel? I feel overall contentment. Contentment. And that contentment comes from having taken care of myself. I didn't learn how to take care of myself. I learned how to take care of others as a trauma survivor. It's a very typical trait. We lose our identity through the process of people pleasing. And I did that. I was born to take care of my mother and to stop her from sliding down her very, very slippery slope, slimy, slippery slope into insanity. When she went there, it was very hard for her to come back. It was very hard, indeed impossible. for the rest of us because it was terrifying to hear her suffering, terrifying to hear her bellow. It was terrifying. My mother became a real primitive force of agony. And wherever I was in that house, I could hear it. So, yes, my job was to be a people pleaser and to help my mother never slip into that place of desperation. However, she did. And when she did, my father blamed me and I blamed me. And I felt like, how could I let this woman suffer so much? What I didn't know then at all, which I know now, is that suffering as a trauma survivor is an intergenerational burden. It comes to us, it's passed down, it's given to us. We don't have a choice about whether to accept it or not. It becomes part of our nerve cell system and it becomes part of our epigenetics. You've probably read the studies about survivors of the trauma of Auschwitz and the other death camps. Their children, the children of Holocaust survivors, have a greater propensity toward anxiety and grieving and suffering and this is not punishment. You know, this is saying in the Bible about the sins of the fathers will be visited on the sons and the daughters. Maybe I just added daughters to be equitable there. Not that to be equitable for anybody. But that was the message, wasn't it? The sins of the parents, what the sins do wrong, we will suffer for the rest of our lives. And I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I choose not to believe that. And so when I think of Christmas Day, I think of much sadness. And do I have sadness today? Yeah, inside the contentment, I also have sadness. I'm sad because I was with my son the last couple of days and his friend, and I love them both. And we did all kinds of great things. We went out for lobster. We did things together. We were playful. We went shopping. We did some lovely things. And he went home. They went home. And this gives me the rest of the day alone. That's actually very relieving. My son is neurodiverse, and there's the mixture of life, right? It's always bittersweet. I love him so much. And being with him is always a watchful time to be sure he's okay, a loving time and a playful time. But then I return to the necessity, as all parents of and family members of neurodiverse children and family members do, I go back into being watchful and hypervigilant. And so that's the way I grew up. Yeah, I'm watching my mother, trying to prevent her from falling into her abyss. And I was good at it. And it's not the way that I want to live my life. I can, as I bet you can. Have you learned to be a wonderful caregiver? Have you learned to help people arise from their sadness? Many of us have. And that's not the only path that we get in our lives. So I want to reflect with you and invite you to reflect with me, and only do so to the extent that's safe. You know that each state in the United States, almost every state in the United States, has a trauma warm line. So if you just go to trauma warm line and look those numbers up for your state, you will find that there's a free number you can call anytime you feel triggered, anytime you feel hurting and just need someone up here to talk with, someone who's a fellow trauma survivor who understands the pain and understands the loneliness and understands the despair and understands the hopelessness. And yet here we are, not just in despair, but with hope, not just in the sorrow, but also in the joy. And so, how do I feel? I feel contented. Of course, you all know, many of you know that I just returned from 17 days abroad, traveling throughout Kerala, and the whole of southern India, from what was called Madras and is now Chennai, all the way to Kochi. A remarkable journey. Remarkable journey 1,000 years back. Remarkable journey seeing sculptures and edifices and countryside, mountains, tea forests, pineapple forests, rubber forests, tamarind, jackfruit, orchids hanging from the trees. I mean, I was in a way in the Garden of Eden. So lush and so hot, so humid, and I loved it. And this was a gift that I gave to myself for my birthday. Yeah, I think by the next time we talk, it'll be my 78th birthday. And so for my 75th birthday, I gave myself a trip to southern India. The spiritual places in southern India got postponed because of COVID, got postponed because I sprained my knee. And then I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to give myself this gift. And I did. And I'm here to say, my friends, if there's something that is your heart's desire, that is your soul's deepest wish, that you want to do, let yourself do it. Let yourself follow your heart's desire, because therein is who you are. Therein is who I am. Therein was my smiling face all over southern India. And a fellow traveler came up to me at the end of this journey. I was in a very small group. And she said to me, I just want to tell you this. I love your spirit. You are so dedicated to living your life. She said this to me as I had henna. I have a little bit there, a little bit of my fingernails, henna all over my hands, and a smile all over my face. It's a beautiful thing for a person like me who was taught you're unworthy. And I won't go through the horrible statements that were made to me. I felt I was unworthy. I felt I deserved nothing. It's remarkable to give myself gifts. And so this whole month of December, I'm giving myself the gift of celebrating my life on earth. I invite you to celebrate your life. I invite you to celebrate every day. Every day. And so I read to you. I just somewhat randomly picked this out of Happiness is Running Through the Streets to Find You. It's page 116, and it's called My Father Was Many Things. You know, biblically, which is the way I was raised, my father's house has my father's mansion has many rooms. You know, that the mention of a father was generally of a loving father who forgave everything, who gave the prodigal son, kept giving to the people of Israel. But there was also a punitive part of that father, casting people away, taking sacrifices. And I read a powerful book decades ago about, I think it was named God. God was the name of the book. It was about all the understandings we have of the numinous, all the understandings we have of God. And what I learned from that book is that much of who God is who we project God to be, which is to say, who we need God to be. And so for going on 36 years now of 12-step recovery, I've been not alone, but I've been in the minority because I don't believe in a higher power. I don't believe that someone has a perfect plan for me. It's beautiful if you do, and I support that 100%. For me, as a child who prayed to that loving God, please take me away, get me out of this. I didn't know what it was called. My father would come into my room at night and I would pray, please take me away from this pain. Don't allow me to be in this madhouse anymore where people hurt each other and hit each other and use a belt, and people beat each other, and people don't love, don't know how to love themselves. Or little children always badly abused in every way. So I pray to that God, please help me. Please get me out of here. I can't take this. I can't take it. And day after day, night after night, I was left there. But I didn't lose hope that there was a loving source that could get me through. I just figured I'm looking at the source the wrong way, or I'm not asking right. So what I've made of that experience that was unchangeable. I mean, how many trauma surviving children have had heartbreaking, bone breaking abuse, spirit breaking abuse, and then we ask for help and there's no help. So what does that say about God? If there is a God. And if you believe in God, bless you. I think it's wonderful. I think that what's great is we all get to have our own pathway here as trauma survivors. Some people have a very strong pathway, and I respect that. I have a pathway that requires me to be honest. And that requires me to say that, yeah, when I was a child and I asked for help, I didn't get it. I survived. But I think there's more to life than that, right? Okay, so I went outside and there was beautiful, the beauty of nature. And that was lovely, but it didn't come into the home. I couldn't carry the hope that I had outside. I couldn't carry the beauty that I had outside into a house full of demons. I couldn't do it. So what I'm saying here is that I believe the nun who said to me one time, Holly Elissa, God can do very little without him. I thought about it. I thought, so this God that I was raised to believe in, that nobody seemed to believe in, but certainly said they did, was the God that was going to save everybody. But then I looked closer at the message, and what the message was is this. The message was, life's hell. It's going to be a lot of pain. It's going to be a lot of sorrow. It's going to be a lot of suffering. But when we die, everything changes. And everybody that we ever wanted to be with will be waiting for us on the other side. And when I was in India, I talked this over with the guy who had been a monk. And he said, no, I thought about that. And I thought, wait a minute. If heaven were being with people that are perfect, perfectly healthy, perfectly happy, wouldn't that get boring? And I've thought of that too. But I also see heaven as a place where we are more soulful, that we come more directly from our souls, that we're souls living with each other, and that means constant growth. So it doesn't mean being stuck and reclaiming life as we know it on earth. Anyway, whatever you believe, I support you. I really do. And I need to find my own way. I guess that's the theme of this program, finding our own way on Christmas Day, finding our own way as trauma survivors, walking each other home. How do we do that? So I'm very optimistic about that today. The contentment that I have comes from a lot of years of having wanted to redo, undo, make over the way in which I was raised. Where there wasn't love, I wanted so badly to have love. Where there wasn't trust, I wanted so badly to have trust. I still want those things. But my path now isn't so much to look for those from the outside in as to check in with myself, find them from the inside out. So there I was traveling all over southern India, flying into Madras, flying out of the only green airport on earth, at Kochi, southern India airport. It's fascinating. And I was alone. I did not know anybody. Did I befriend everybody? You bet. We're only 16 people on this small group tour. I made a point of knowing everybody's name, getting to talk with everybody, having a connection, if possible, with everybody that was with them that was possible. And I was contented. I was surrounded by so much beauty and so much different life. And I wanted to see it all and I wanted to experience it all. I wanted to be, I think Thoreau said something about this. I wanted to live life so deep. I wanted to live deep and suck out the very marrow of life so that when I came to die, I wouldn't discover that I have not lived. And that's what I did every moment in India, including the times when I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go on that rainforest early morning walk. And I'm glad I didn't because that's where they got leeches. When they got all muddy. I have enough of the muddy, the wet. It was like really monsoony. For a lot of the time we were there, the Chennai airport got closed down because of the cyclone, the monsoon. What I'm saying is, as a wounded child years ago, I had great wonders, and I had great astonishment, and I had great questioning and curiosity. I also had terrible fear and terrible dread and overwhelming anxiety. And the fear, if I got too far away from what? From what I knew, I would die. And that is probably a message to trauma survivors. Thou shalt stay right here and take care of us. And don't you ever outgrow us, or you will feel so guilty. So guilty. I think that's the theme of trauma survivors. Has that happened to you? Have you felt ashamed of yourself or guilty because you have grown beyond the abuser? Because you have come to accept them? Because you don't need anymore to define yourself by blaming them? If that's the case, there's beauty in that. And that is the precursor. Here's where I am today. I have devoted decades to trying to replace what I didn't have, to trying to claim what I didn't have. And that will always be with me, to see the things I never got to see. Will always be with me. And then going to India was very much that too. I'm flying 14 and a half hours on Qatar Airways. I don't know anybody, but I befriend people. I buy a seat that allows me to lie down. I sleep. I sleep for hours. Yeah. And I choose the happiest of breakfasts and the happiest of meals. And yeah, and they give me a candle. Of course, it can't be a flame, but they give me a candle so that I can watch this flickering light all night on guitar. And as I was leaving, Diamond, the my attendant, handed it to me. Take this with you, he said. Okay, I still have it. So if the pathway of having been a survivor first is probably to pretend it didn't happen and to deny it, once I accept that I am a survivor, then much of my life becomes trying to make up for lost time, trying to claim what I didn't have. If I wasn't loved, I need to be loved. More and more, I discovered that the most important person to love me is for me to love myself. I don't mean to sound shallow. I mean to be open to who I am. I'm a sad lady sometimes. I'm an angry lady other times. I'm a joyful lady much of the time. I'm a person that people want to have. What does this mean? They want to have their picture taken with me. They want to talk with me. I'm glad about that. Is it because I have seen so much in life and accepted so much in life and worked on facing the demons? I don't know. I accept that about myself. That's been my life choice, is to not run, but to turn around and face the things that terrify me the most. I tried running. I was real good at it. I wasn't happy doing it. So I'm going to read you now, on this Christmas Day, 2023, my father. My father was many things. Page 116. Happiness is running through the streets to find you, translating trauma's harsh legacy into healing. My father was many things. He stored his celestial charts beneath the cupboard in the kitchen, pulling out these scrolls to determine which Boy Scout could win his astronomy badge. My father held old instruments with pale green-yellow fluid to measure a line's straightness. He built our house literally from the ground up. He ran for and eventually, after not being elected many times, was elected mayor of our tiny village. My father smiled at me once. I was perhaps 3, left to cavort freely at the unprotected edge of the excavated rectangular earthen pit of our basement. I watched my father's competence and marveled at his work, transforming earth to edifice, commanding wildness into order. My father looked up for a moment at my awestruck child's face, and he smiled. My father smiled at me. I can feel his smile now. I do not recall him smiling at my innocence again. As I live in that timeless moment now, and I can see him, and I can see the earth, and I can see myself with my little black and red checkered warm jacket for the cold weather. And I remember being totally free, no one watching me as I explored around that pit. I mean, that was the cellar. That's where the cellar was going to be, and I'm free to run around it. Nobody cares I mean, they might care if I got hurt, but I didn't know that. I was free to explore. And so as I live in that timeless moment now, I'm grateful for it. As a child is grateful for lights on a Christmas tree. As a child is grateful for lights on a Christmas tree, or snow slanting under a street lamp. I also no longer hold on to that moment as pure. I know the complexity of my father's messages to me. Few, if any, of those messages were about love. I'm quite sure my father did not know how to love me. He passed on the woundedness that he knew. This was his legacy to me. This is the legacy I seek to change as I write. My extended family converged on the coast of Maine for my October 1977 wedding. Everyone was celebratory, perhaps relieved that the errant daughter, that's me, of course, at age 31, was at last settling down, sitting across from my parents at an upscale restaurant on Falmouth's rocky shore. I heard them repeat one of their mantras. "We're so grateful we never had to discipline you girls. You were so well behaved." Without censoring myself, I blurted, "But you beat us. But you beat us." Equally uncensored. My father did what he had never done before and would never do again. "Can you forgive me, daughter?" he asked, placing his hand on top of mine. I responded as honestly as I was able. "Yes, I have to," I acknowledged. As was our way, we closed down in a flash, scurrying from awkward intimacy. Later, my mother called me, scolding. Your father will not speak to you again. You use your words to hurt. As was my way, I blamed myself ever after. I should have forgiven him. What was wrong with me? I did not ask. Why did I respond as I did? Because I knew the answer. As was my way, I told the truth. I knew I was expected to forgive him. However, in that raw moment, I was not ready. My broken heart could not suddenly sew itself together in time to release the pain my father's abuse, incest, and disdain had caused me. That healing would require another 40 years. That healing would require another 40 years. You know, if you've read the book, and if you don't, I shall tell you that I sought to find out who I was by trying to understand my father better. If he couldn't love me, perhaps if I understood him, I could understand why he couldn't love me. And I did not have the benefit then of knowing about narcissism. I mean, I knew the mythology of it with Narcissus, the self-centered guy looking at himself in water. I got that. But that wasn't, I had no idea about the dynamic between abused people and narcissists. As you know, a narcissist is a narcissistic personality disorder. It is a disorder in the DM, whatever is called the DMR, the diagnostic of mental challenges. Yeah, it's definitely there, but I didn't know that. I thought my father was like, he was it. He was the only father I knew. As I said to one of my sisters recently, the only one that's living, I said to her, you know, coming from a narcissistic father, and she said, aren't all men narcissistic? And that was a kind of nihilistic statement because it just basically said, what's wrong? You know, to get over it. Everybody's got a narcissistic father. But no, that's not true. Not true for me. Not everyone had a narcissistic father who would say to his toddler child, to the mother of that child, get her out of my sight. And who had no problem with me being put in a cold pantry and told not to cry and not be given any food. That kind of banishment, no, not every child gets that. That's abuse. That's abuse. So I didn't know what it meant to be raised by a narcissist. Now I'm beginning to really get it. I listen to podcasts. I read about narcissism daily. And I understand that a narcissist literally doesn't care. A narcissist cannot see anybody else. A narcissist is only, it looks at life from the standpoint of, I've got this need. My need is what drives the earth because I'm the center of the earth. And you better supply me with my need. So my father's need was to be all powerful, to be God, to be the person who, when he said something, everybody snapped right to it, and also everybody obeyed it, and everybody believed it. He believed it. And we had no identities of our own. We had no identities of our own. Everything was from the outside in. So this understanding that I was the offspring of a narcissist is crucial to me because there was no one else there to protect me from his abuse. And I was supposed to have served him. I failed him from birth by not being his son, and he just could never stand me. So I was his whipping boy, his scapegoat, his person that he just could not bear. Such disdain for me. And if he didn't like someone, if the person walked through the front door of our house, the person would not be alive to him. And I think much of the time I was not alive to him. And so much of my childhood on this Christmas Day, much of my childhood was burning, a painful, wrenching heartache to have what I didn't have, to be loved. It was just the simple things that a child wants. Just love me, just hold me so that I'm not afraid. I never experienced what it was like for someone to comfort or soothe me until I felt safe. I never felt safe. I'm 77 and I still sometimes have to work to feel safe on earth. I still have to work at that. It's nowhere near as wrenching as it was. I was able to fly halfway around the world. I was able to be on my own halfway around the world. I was able to land at an airport not knowing anybody. I was able to explore all these places not knowing where my feet would carry me. I was able to find what I wanted to find and to enjoy what I loved to enjoy. And so, my friends, I believe from my own experience, and I ask you about yours, on this Christmas Day, we're reminded that the world is about light, it's about love, it's about promise, it's about hope. I believe those things, not naively, and yet I believe them. I was not the oldest person, but pretty close to the oldest person on this tour. And I had one of the hardest times, not the hardest time, but I had a really hard time climbing up those big, tall steps to the bus. I don't have that kind of strength anymore. I used to, but I don't. And I refused because if I felt unsafe, I refused to put myself in an unsafe situation. So there were times, most of the time, temples and sacred sites did not have guardrails. They didn't have railings. And so I would just say to Rajesh or one of the other people in the program, help me. Just help me. Let me lean on you. And for someday, it won't be long before you need somebody to lean on. And I would just lean on them. And then I felt safe and I was able to do most of the stuff. Most of the stuff. What I'm saying here is that I've come by facing my demons and facing the pain and acknowledging that life is bittersweet. It's not just bitter. Acknowledging that life is bittersweet. I can have, and I have a beautiful life today. So there I was, going all over southern India, and there were times when I chose not to do things because I knew they would be unsafe for me, or they would cause me fear, deep fear. Other times I said, I'm not, no, come on, you got to make this right. We got on 3 boats, 3 sailing vessels. And for each one of those sailing vessels, there wasn't really a safe way to enter. This is India and a lot of other countries don't have the Americans with Disabilities Act. So there wasn't really a contemplation in advance, how do we get a safe ramp? And there was another person who had was really otherwise able, and she needed as much of safety to get across as I did. I mean, I'm not going to leap anymore. If I leap, I might miss. I'm not doing it. So she and I, mainly me, insisted that they get ramps, that they create ways so that we could get across safely. And there were times getting up in a tuk-tuk where there's just one place where you're supposed to place the ball of your foot and bound in. Well, honey, I can't place the ball of my foot and bound in. I need to like get help. So I would call people around me and say, hey, look, help me get down. And these strong men would come up and I'd lean on them and slowly I'd get off from the height. So what I'm saying is I had a most beautiful trip, including my otherwise able ways, including my 77-year-old body with severe arthritis, including I'm overweight. I'm working on that now, but including that, I had a beautiful time. It was a beautiful time that was age appropriate and that was how can I say this? We all have pain, we all have sorrow, we all have ways in which we are otherwise able. I think the little child in me believed that I would someday be cured and all healed, and I wouldn't have pain. But you know what? Unless we get a big change to life, life's going to have its pain. So there were times when I decided not to go on a tour because I needed a nap. I'm really glad I did. So what I want to say here in reading that chapter about my father is this. I devoted much of my life to finding out who my father was, and I kept not feeling like I was getting very far. I looked to him to find, I felt he knew, and he was hiding it within him, and he just was so stubborn and so cranky and so unloving that he just wasn't going to share. What I came to discover at the end of his life is that he didn't know any other way. As a narcissist, he knew he didn't know any other way to be. And the sad thing at the end of the book, and also the healing thing, is that I came to see, as he was about to die, his choice was to attempt to abuse me, even as he was about to die. His choice was to sexually take charge. To which I said, no. And perhaps my life began there when I said, no, I will not be your slave. No, I will not put you before me. No, I will not believe your reality before I believe my reality. I was so angry and so sad, but mostly I was angry because I had thought that this person that had held so much power over this whole family and over myself and my sister, I thought there must be something deeply, there had to be something deep within him. He had to be covering love. And it didn't. Narcissists, I'm just beginning with my heart to accept this. Narcissists have such self-hatred and are so much about themselves that they cannot find a way to care about anybody else. My father didn't care about me. He did care that I made him look good. He liked that. When I was winning lots of accolades, but he could never praise me. I remember the time when I had written 5 books, and two of them were bestsellers, and one of them had gotten an award for any book in any category that improved the quality of life. He didn't want to read my books. So on this Christmas day, let me say, much of my life as a trauma survivor, I devoted to trying to get the things I didn't have. I thought that was the way to heal. The law says, make the person whole again. Give the person back what the person had or should have had. Make the person whole. I'm a recovering attorney, and I wanted to be made whole. I wanted to experience love, but I couldn't do that without bringing my past into the present. So what did I do? I brought my past right up into and found myself being attracted to a narcissist, marrying narcissism. Narcissism pervades in my family. Maybe my sister got it right. That what man isn't a narcissist? Well, there are plenty. I know plenty of men, many of you who are listening, that are not narcissists. And I've come to see the danger, the abject danger of a narcissist being in charge. The destruction, the disdain, the annihilation. And so what I've shifted to, my friends, is this. I've shifted from that legal concept of trying to make myself whole. I've shifted from that because there's a lot of the outside in there, by which I mean a lot of like getting things I didn't have, giving myself things that I never got. And there's a transition after that. And here's, I'd like to describe it. Transition is now it's called, I call it just finding my own way. Finding my own way. If happiness is running through the streets to find me, I have to turn around and greet it. I can't keep running from it. And if I kept running from it by saying, and I've had this standard. All of you guys had perfectionism as a part of the characteristics of being a survivor. I've had this perfectionism that has haunted me most of my life. You know, if I don't do this perfectly, then I can't deserve this. If I don't get that done, then I can't do this. It's a horrible way to live. It's like a punitive. It's punitive if I pay my penance, if I pay my dues, if I pay the price of admission, then I'll get. That's not the way. There's still part of me that believes that, you know, earn my way through life, but that's not the way it works. I mean, look at all the people who have done good things in their lives, but they still didn't feel good about themselves. And when they came to die, they weren't necessarily happy. When I come to die, I want to feel like I've lived. I've lived. And so when I find my own way, here's how I do it. And I invite you, how do you find your own way? What's your Christmas gift to yourself? It's timeless. That soothes your heart. That helps you feel like even though nobody soothed you, in my case, nobody soothed me, nobody hugged me, nobody told me you're going to be okay. There was no one there to do that. They didn't see me. I was terrified having panic attacks. I was terrified dissociating. I was terrified I was going to be killed. And there was never a soul that hugged me and helped me feel like in his arms I was safe. And so it was so different. When I got on this flight to fly to Doha from Boston, and Boston to Doha, Doha all the way to Madras. It was called Madras. In the past, I would have been so terrified that I would have gone crazy. I would have had to medicate myself, super medicate myself to just be able to make those flights. And then worry that the medication would wear off and I'd start having a panic attack. And the panic attack at 43,000 feet with 8 more hours to go ain't going to do much. It's going to be horribly scary. It's going to be right back to being terrified and having no one to hold me, no one to assure me that it's safe. I don't feel that way anymore. I feel that way when I travel. I felt so at home in the air. I felt so at home in the sky. I felt so cared for. I took off my travel clothes and I asked for the biggest pajama size they had so I could just like swim in it. And I slept for hours. I slept for hours. And the flight attendants would say to me, so how much before we land do you want me to wake you for breakfast? That's how I got waked up for breakfast. That was amazing. And then there's another way I took care of myself. I don't know the Doha airport. It's very modern and it's very cool, but I don't know it. And I thought, wait a minute, I've only got an hour and 45 minutes to get to land, to take my stuff through customs and then to find my next gate. And so as I was reading and reading, I discovered this surface, El Ma something. It's interesting because Alma in Latin means soul. There was this service where people would come and they would meet me the minute I got off the airplane. They had a sign, Holly Elissa Bruno. Came right up, they took my luggage, they walked me right through all those stops. I barely had to stop. I mean, I have global entry, but with this, man, they just walked me right to the front of the line and walked me right through. I mean, it is privilege and it is entitlement. And I was willing to pay for it. Why? Because I didn't want to have the fear or the panic that might come from being in a foreign land, a foreign airport, and not having anybody there who knew me to help me. So I hired these people and they were wonderful. We befriended each other both ways. We befriended each other with these great conversations. They took care of everything. They took my luggage. They took me to a lounge where I got served cappuccino. And then they took me directly to the gate, got me on board, loaded up my luggage. And so there it was, my friends, at age 77. I was being treated by my own choice. I was getting the hug and the safety net, and the fear was being taken away. I'm going to be fine. And when I landed in Madras, it was 1:55 in the morning. This is after 2 days, right, of being up in the air, one flight and then another flight, one flight 14.5 hours, the other 5.5 hours. I landed. I did pretty well getting through there. I didn't have anybody greeting me to get through customs. I did pretty well. And then, oh, did I mention my luggage? But it worked well enough to get me through the trip. So I came out at Madras Airport and I'm exhausted. I had stopped to translate some money into Indian rupees. And as I walked out, I couldn't see anybody. I had my name up, but then I saw, there it is. There's a person who's going to help me. And he's going to drive me the hour and a half to the hotel. And when I got there, the people at the hotel were ready for me. They greeted me, escorted me to my room. And I call this, my friends, making my own way. I don't do it without help. I do it by asking for help. I make my own way by clearing out the briar patch and the squid ink and the fog and the pollution that stop me from knowing my heart's desire. My heart's desire is to experience the world as it is. I used to say before it became an eponymous, like a connected shopping mall. But shopping malls aren't quite so overtaking as they were before. Only COVID interrupted that. My heart's desire is to live on this earth, live my life without being controlled by shame or guilt or fear. I can have shame, I don't like it. I can have guilt, it helps me. I can have fear. I can face that. I can learn from it. But shame, I'm not worthy of shame. Shame is what annihilates me. Shame is the way I was controlled. You ought to be ashamed of yourself, Matt. You don't deserve to exist. That's never true. It's never true. Anyone who makes it to this earth has a right to find her way. I only forfeit that right. I harm myself, and I still get a chance if I harm somebody else. And then mostly I get another chance. Finding our own way, my friends, we wrap up here. Trauma survivors get our souls bashed. Trauma survivors get our bodies bashed. Trauma survivors get our dreams dashed. Trauma survivors get our happiness stepped on. Trauma survivors get love in all the wrong places. To heal and to translate trauma's harsh legacy into healing, I need to turn right around and face the thing that scares me most. And I have turned right around and faced those things so often and so much that they start peeling off and jettisoning. For example, I have always had this fear from the sexual abuse that was a lot to do with I'm sad to say, my mom's. I've always had this fear that anyone gets near me, I'll have this gagging response. Don't even dare get close to me. And the terrifying thing was that when I get a panic attack, I can't breathe. I can't swallow. I thought that was going to be with me my whole life. And so what did I do in the last couple of months? In fact, in November, I had had the courage to talk with my trauma therapist about this fear of having anything, any endoscope touch me. Couldn't face it. After I spoke with him, I talked with my PCP, my regular care physician, and I explained the same thing to her. As a trauma survivor, I'm terrified of having an endoscope, but I need to have one because swallowing has become sometimes more difficult. And regurgitation sometimes happens. That's no fun. And so I said to her, I told her this. She said, "Oh, yeah, it's really natural." What? Nobody talked about that one either. It's really natural. And so what did I do? She said to me, and I only heard it out of the corner of my ear. She said, when you have your colonoscopy done, you can ask the same guy to do an endoscopy. That's what they do. And so I met with Dr. Song and we went through all this stuff. And then only at the last minute, but I did it. I said, can I also, here's some symptoms that I've had. Can I also have an endoscope? Of course. Of course. And then, as is the way, I needed to work even harder because I had said that, but I didn't say to him, and I need to have this done before the end of November because I'm going to India and I don't want to be in India having any trouble with food, thinking that there might be something more endemic, might be something wrong with me, not just food poisoning. Anyway, I didn't get any of that in India, which I've caught in other places. I didn't say that. So when I thought about it, I thought, wait, and they scheduled me for December. And I said, wait a minute, guys, I'm going to India. I need to have this done before I go. And so one person scheduled me for one procedure before I flew to India. And I thought about that and I said, that's not really what I need. I need the assurance that my whole system has been checked out to be sure that I'm okay before I travel halfway around the world and eat a cuisine that is not familiar to me. And so I called again, and Dr. Song called me back on a Sunday. It's so sacred. I love when people are looking out for each other. He called me back on a Sunday and he said, if you can come in Wednesday morning, I'll do both. I said, I'm there. And I was there. Had them both done. And there's something slightly amiss with my esophagus, but it's healable by medication. So that's what I'm doing. What I'm saying here, my friends, is that for me as a trauma survivor, I need to unleash, unpeel, let go of rather than try to control the things that have controlled me. If I get in a power struggle with fear, this doesn't work very well for me. I mean, I know other people gird themselves up and they go off to fight battles. I've done that. But if it's a fear from within myself, I need to just get honest with myself and say, I'm scared to death of this. And why am I scared to death of this? Because I thought in my childhood I was going to be killed for this. And now I know I'm going to die, but I'm not going to be dead. I'm not going to be killed by something that came out of the inside of me and terrified me to death. And so, yeah, on this Christmas day, this day of beginning, and whatever religion you are this day of light returning, this day of a people being saved, this day of a community through Kwanzaa being honored, this day in the dark time of the year offers light. And that's the whole message of trauma surviving. It's not a punishment. I'm not a bad soul, the evil soul that deserves punishment. This isn't my karma. The fact of my life was I was born into a family of sorrow and insanity and incest, and no one talked about it, so therefore it didn't happen. By choosing to talk about it, I claim what happened. And I may go to my grave, I don't know if I'll have a grave, but I may have my ashes blowing over the meadows without the love of my family. That's okay. I've come to see that a trauma survivor that confronts the sorrow and the cause of it is going to be too much for a family that chooses to live in denial. And I don't even have to blame or shame or hate anybody for that anymore. Do I feel lonely sometimes? Yeah. Is this Christmas Day? Do I have a whole loving Italian family around me kissing me cheek-o-leek? No, I don't. No, I don't. And I feel sad about that. But I do have so much more grounding in myself. Do I love myself today? There's the victory over wrongdoing. When any trauma survivor can say, I am okay as I am. I'm enough. There's the bliss. And so, my friends, my fellow trauma survivors, as we walk each other home, I look forward so much to being with you every Monday afternoon, East Coast time, 3 o'clock, and wherever else you are on earth. I look forward to being with you at your time as we help each other find our way out of the sorrow, out of the life sentence, and into healing. May you have a sacred, joyful, meaningful, and full of light holiday. Stay safe. Living well.